Greetings once again. Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and this is Reading Machiavelli's Prince. Today we're looking at chapter 25, the famous, infamous chapter 25. This is the chapter that a couple teachers, a teacher from the Naval War College and a couple other teachers have lost their jobs because of advocating rape or advocating violence to women by reading something from here. So, oh my God, the YouTube censors are going to go crazy when we are doing this chapter. This is a very important chapter. This ends the final section of the Prince, which is the discussion of prudence in the Prince that started in chapter 20 and goes here. This chapter, the title is, again, we're using the Alvarez translation. The link to the published information about the Alvarez is below. It starts, this chapter is 9 paragraphs long. It's one of the longer ones. I think it is the third longest, or fourth longest. Hold on, let me just double check. When I say things like this, I always think remember I'm getting old, and I'm old enough that I have to verify things I say. Because I remember something and then say, well, but it's not that really. It's something else. Hold on. Of course, this is not what I thought it was. Well, this is it. Yeah, there it is. It's the four. Yeah, this is the not the four. This 9 chapters is the fifth longest. It's the 5th place of the in length, and there's 3 other chapters along with chapter 25. It's chapter 12 and chapter 8. So this is actually this is not even the middle of the lengths of the paragraph. It's the second half. It's the top quart. It's the 50% quartile, as they say in statistics. It's the 50% quartile of the length of the things. Again, this is the chapter on fortune. So let's get the title. How much fortune is able to do in human things, and what mode may one oppose her? Okay, this is that famous thing. What do I oppose her now? About Fortuna is one of the great images of classic times. Go look at Google. It's the medieval fortune and chance is one of almost a kind of classical goddess in some sense. But in medieval times, this is one of the forces of this. Fortune is this idea of that there's fate, the fates, or the forces of nature that is able to compel action. Fortune tied to chance. In other words, occurrences of things things that are beyond your intent or beyond your control. Maybe, or not even necessarily beyond your control, is that things that you don't intend it, and maybe you're even working to do something else, and other things emerge. Things occur that don't allow you to do it. Right? That is what fortune. Fortune is seen as a goddess in that sense, or a divine force in medieval. I'm not showing pictures. You'd see pictures of all in the Middle Ages world of how the time of the Middle Ages, particularly in southern Italy and these things. The Romans had a perception of her as a divine creature. So there's a lot of mythology about fortuna, right? Fortuna. Now, what's so interesting about fortune, thus, is it's not your power; it's to rely on others, and remember that. So let's look at this. Let's start our first paragraph. And it is not unknown to me how many have had and still have the opinion that because the things of this world are made in a mode governed by fortune and by God, that men with their prudence are unable to correct them. Indeed, they have no remedy, and because of this they judge that it does not do to sweat much over things, but to let them be governed by chance. Okay. In other words, he's basically saying that the things of the world are governed by God. But he does this. He says they're governed by fortune and by God. And prudence does not have much, and men with their prudence are unable to correct them. So fortune and God. So it seems to be these two forces, fortune and God. And therefore, it's the things, and men have man and fortune and God together control the outcomes of things, and that our prudence has almost no impact on this. It has little. That means may have some, but not more than little means less than significant amount, right? And because of this, what they sweat, it doesn't pay to effort. It doesn't pay much to worry about it. Just let it happen, and let the things happen. Just don't try to force things. The idea is, right? Let what's going to happen happen. This is the attitude, he says. Okay. This opinion has been believed more in our times because of the great changes in things which have been seen and maybe have been seen every day beyond any human conjecture. In other words, the things are changing. He's saying this belief, this view that chance, or the forces of the divine, or the things of by chance, fortune, control the affairs of men. And things, and human judgment and human action is very little to stop, and that men should simply just let things happen. And he says, and this is more so believed now than in his time. In his time, he's writing this, more so believed now than other times. Because why? Because of all the great changes that happen. And by he means this, what? You see the French coming and invading into Italy. And then this led all this change. In other words, he's saying what's happened. For hundreds of years, no foreigner came in to interfere with the Italians. And the Italians the various Italian places were fighting against each other. And this was balanced. All of a sudden, the French, a powerful foreigner, comes in and it totally destroys everything. And everything is tossed overboard. In fact, things that the church was always weak now becomes strong and much more powerful. And players who were important for the game, both Florence and Venice, have been greatly reduced in their power. As will be Milan, because Milan will become a puppet of France. And Naples could become a puppet of Spain. So what is this? All of a sudden, the foreigners will have big input here. And he says, and this is why these things that they had no control over. This happened. Now he says what? Thinking about this, I am myself sometimes, and in some part, inclined to their opinion. Okay, this is not. He said, thinking about this, I myself, sometimes, in some part, inclined. Now, very qualitative of saying he's inclined to it. He ends the first paragraph. The next paragraph. Nevertheless, in order that our free will may not be extinguished, I judge that it could be true that fortune is the arbiter of half our actions, but she lets the other half, or nearly that, be governed by us. In other words, okay, first of all, notice something. God, before it's God and fortune. He lets fortune keep half. God is out of the picture. A little bit. This is Machiavelli's imperative impiety. He doesn't talk about God. He does not speak about God. He speaks of fortune. And therefore, for our free will not to be extinguished, we must let it be 50-50. Or at least somewhat so, right? Let it be somewhat little, maybe a little less. And he goes, what? In other words, free will be the extinguished, comma. I judge that it would be true that fortune is the arbiter of half our action, but that she lets the other half, the fortune, lets the other half, or nearly that be governed by us. So we half and half, 50-50, right? And I liken her to one of those violent rivers. Fortune is like a violent river, right? Which, when they become angry, flood the plains, destroy the trees and buildings, remove the earth from one place and deposit it in another, semicolon. Everyone flees their advance, comma. Everyone surrenders their impetus, comma. Unable to oppose it in any way, period. So he says, fortune is a river first. Fortune is a friend of mine, and it wasn't my teacher, my teachers, Roger Master, a very famous scholar on Rousseau, but also wrote two books. One book about it's called Fortune is a River, and then the bigger book, the lecture series at I think Loyola, by Leonardo Machiavelli. His book is about Leonardo Machiavelli's plot to tame the Arvo River, trying to channel it. Machiavelli and Leonardo da Vinci were involved in a plan to make the river controllable, so that by doing this, to kind of make it very difficult for Pisa, make it easier for them to kind of control Pisa, move the river, so take away Pisa's ability to defend itself, and also to improve the conditions. In other words, therefore, in other words, it's about using technology and using science, man's craftsmanship, man's arts, to take care of the violence. So, because the river is a violent river, why? Because during the seasons the water comes down, and this is the time when it's violent. Other times it's not violent. Okay, when it's the hot summer and it's drier in the fall. The water is less and smaller, and the river is less violent. And therefore, what you can do is you can prepare. As he says that you can prepare. Now, what he says, you say this, right? And he goes, deposit it, and everyone flees in advance. Everyone surrenders. In other words, he goes, I like one of those things, and I repeat it again, is what I can her to one of those violent rivers. When she becomes angry, the floods the plain, destroys the trees and buildings, removes the earth from one place and deposits another, semicolon. Everyone flees their advance, comma. Everyone surrenders to their impetus, comma, unable to oppose it in any way. So therefore, the river at its flooding and its powerful base cannot be stopped. And although these things are so, it does not follow that men, when there are quiet times, cannot therefore make provisions with defenses and embankments in such a mode that, rising ladder, either they will go through a canal, or their impetus will not be so licentious or so harmful. Period. Like I said, you create a dam, you create things, you create water breaks that let the water go. You plan. In other words, it might be a good winter, might be a bad winter. Therefore, a good winter with low snow means that the spring the river won't be that bad. But then what happens? What happens if there's lots of rain and lots of flooding rain, and all of a sudden the rain comes? You can't control fortune in that sense. Things beyond your control will happen. But you can prepare. You can prepare the embankment and make the embankments. Plan for the flood. Plan for when the river comes that would move it. That's what he's saying. You can make embankments and make defenses and embankments in such a mode that allows you to mitigate the effects of the fortune and the river of fortune making its way to do this. Okay, again, I love this myself. Okay. I need to turn off my phone. I thought I did. I'm going to take some water. Pardon me. Yes, this is bad video things, but you can see. So what happens here? What is he saying? He'll continue here. In other words, you should prepare. In other words, you should prepare. And if you prepare, it's fortunate it won't be that licentious or harmful in that sense. Next paragraph. This is the third paragraph. The same happens with fortune, who demonstrates her power, where there is no ordered virtue to resist her. Note a semicolon. And she turns her impetus, where she knows embankments and defenses hold her have not been built. Whoa! Think about this. As the river, in other words, fortune is a river in that sense. So what is true about the river, about making the embankments do this, the same is about your relationship with fortune. In other words, if you have ordered virtue, you have ordered your character and ordered your abilities, your virtue, in such a way. The ruler orders his virtues. He said, having prudence, we talked about, having good judgment, being able to know what's in your advantage, knowing the difference between what seems to be and what is, knowing how to, knowing the things of the people, knowing the great, not doing things to become hated, not doing things to become held in contempt, not making yourself dependent upon others, making sure you don't shepherding your resources to the point where you can, and creating laws and doing the things he talked about in the previous chapter that make you look great. Good laws, good arms, and great deeds that makes you achieve your stability. All of this requires virtue, your prudence. Now, what is he saying here? If you've done this, fortune is going to have less disaster. It will impact you, but it won't impact you if you didn't have them. In other words, fortune is going to still be the violent river, but if your virtues will be the embankments and these devices that will mitigate the impact of the negative effects of the fortune. So, and he goes, in other words, and she will turn her impetus where she knows embankments and defenses to hold her have not been built. Okay, and now this is the I want to make sure I'm not completely wrong here. Yeah, he's being formal here. I'm not looking at the Italian. I'm just looking at the translation. I've been looking at the Italian lately. So, and is courteous, is formal you, right? And you will consider, and if you consider Italy, which is the seat of these changes, and the one which put them into motion, you will see her to be a country without embankments and without any defenses, semicolon, comma. For, comma, if she had been defended by the needful virtue, comma, if as were Germany, Spain, and France, this flood would neither have made the great changes which it has, nor would it have come. Now, De Alvarez has footnote 2 on page 149. Machiavelli's remark on page 2 of the Discourses that the virtue of modern times resides in France, Turkey, and the Kephalite and the peoples of Germany. He is silent about the virtue of Spain. Instead, he has been in chapters of 18 and 21. He praises the faithlessness, the ability to give rare examples, and a pious cruelty of Ferdinand. The comparisons of the natures of the people has been significant, similar to the comparisons of the nature of princes in chapter 18, chapter 17, and also in chapter 4 above. Now, what is he saying here? France, what's so interesting about these countries, the countries he mentions here, the countries that he mentions in this sentence of Germany, Spain, in France. Because why? They have good laws, ordinance of the soldiers. They've had their arms. They have arms. They don't rely on mercenaries. Well, France kind of relies on mercenaries. That they rely on Swiss. I'm gonna have to turn on the thing. I got some bad air coming in from the outside because it's raining. Therefore, the flood of the French, the weakness of this, the reliance on mercenaries, the sin of Italy, he said, was the inexperience of their princes, and not knowing arms, not knowing arms, and relying on the arms of others, and therefore the great sin of Italy was what? The sin of relying on mercenary arms, the concante, right? And their faithlessness in that sense. And therefore he's making the comment that if it wasn't for these not preparing, not having good arms, not having good laws, not having the conflict that led to this having some kind of unitedness against any outsider coming in, this would never have happened. In other words, fortune, the chaos of Italy, the chaos of what's happening in Italy right now, is a product of not preparing, of not having virtue and judgment to prepare for bad times, and therefore the effects of this. Right, the flood would not have been so great. And he goes, this flood would neither have made so great changes it had, nor would it have come. And I wish that had been said about opposing fortune to suffice, with respect to the general. In other words, and I wish that what has been said about opposing fortune to suffice, with respect to the general. You should oppose fortune. By what? Making preparations. This is what he's saying. This is what he's going to say to suffice. He wishes this would be enough to suffice, right? I wish that what has been said about opposing fortune to suffice, respect to the general discussion, right? But restricting next paragraph, by restricting myself more to particulars, I say that one may seem a prince happy today and ruined tomorrow, without having seen him change his nature or any quality. Period. In other words, if the prince doesn't change his nature or quality, he can be happy one moment and then unhappy the next. Next, I believe. No, this is again one of these things. I believe, right? A lot of I believes here. I believe this arises, first, from the causes which have previously been discussed at length. That is, that the prince who depends wholly on fortune falls when she changes. So if you're relying on fortune, if you rely on others, rely on fortune, when fortune changes or the others change, you fall. So that first and foremost, those rely on fortune, not virtue. I believe then that he is happy who finds that the mode of his procedure at one with the qualities of the times, and similarly that he is unhappy who with his procedures is in discord with the times. Period. In other words, this is a very awkward, in the Italian in here, this is a very awkward sentence. In other words, if your procedures, the things you've done, the preparations, your procedures, the things that you do, in other words, the mode of his procedures, if they're in accordance, the way you do your things, the way you proceed, the prince's way of his procedures, how does he do things? How does he carry out things? How does he operate? If the mode of him doing it, if it suits the times, then he'll be happy. If he's stuck, the idea is that people don't change their modes. We get habits. We have habits of governing and habits of behaving. And if you can't change your habit, in other words, the danger here is that it's very difficult for most people to go from one way of doing things to another way of thinking. Okay, and most of us don't have this ability to go flip flop, go from one way of doing things to a completely other ways. We're so our habits, and also what everybody says. Sometimes we're expected to. The danger is we're afraid of changing because we're afraid of how people will see us and perceive us. Okay, we don't know how to move so quickly from one type of behavior to another type of behavior. So he says here, the danger here is you'll be happy when what? You'll be happy when your procedures and the way you do things are in accord with fortune. And if you're in discord with fortune, you will be unhappy. In other words, if the way your procedures and modes of doing it are against what fortune is going to go against them and not benefit them, not allow you. This will bring you unhappiness. Okay, this is that weird thing, and he is unhappy who with his procedures in discord with the times. Okay, next paragraph. For one sees in the things which conduct them to the end that each has before him, comma, that is to say, glory and riches, comma, that men proceed there variously. So regarding glory and riches, there's two ways to go about this. One with circumspection, and the other impetuously. So this, okay. So therefore, there's two ways. Again, these are another. Remember the virtues. Something this way. Remember the 11. We now get another list. Let's get our piece of paper and let's go do it here, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So what we first get what? We get one with circumspection, and the other one with what? So things towards riches and glory, right? And then circumspection and impetuosity. One is by violence, and the other with art. One with patience, and the other, it's contrary. Okay, it's contrary. And each one with these diverse modes is able to arrive there. So these are the modes. There's three patterns, three pairs of two. So there's circumspection versus impetuousness, violence, art. Patience is contrary, impatience, right? Impatience. That's his contrary. Impatience. Those are the things. Now he says what? Then he says, and is from these diverse modes is able to arrive there. Next sentence. This is the fourth paragraph, sorry. It's page 147, last section there, page 147. And he says, one might again see two cautious men. One arrives at his purpose while the other does not. Similarly, two prospers equally with diverse plans. One being cautious and the other impetuous. All of which arises from nothing other than the procedures, which does or does not conform with the qualities of the time. Now, the term quality time does not mean the time situation, the situation that they're in. The times means the environment you're in. The time does not mean the historical epoch in this sense of the word. Wait a minute, is Machiavelli saying history and time is like these things, and you have to conform to this, and isn't this historicism, man? No, this is not about historicism. This is not about the time consciousness or contextual consciousness. This is about what? He's talking about here the situation, the environment you're in. The times is the condition of what's going on. What is going on in that sense? The times here is the situation at that moment, or at this period, at this place in this time. In fact, this is what's interesting. Time is very relative in this. What's a situation in one place is not going to be the same situation, even though they're at the same time, a point of history. The same moment in time and space, things are not always going to happen the same way in the same situation. It's the interaction of where you are, the location and the situation, and the interaction of the actors and the events and the forces at play. And Machiavelli is saying this, and therefore the procedure, and therefore even though you have the same procedure in that situation, if it's not fitting for this, two people both impetuous. Okay, one will succeed and the other won't. Why? Because this one, impetuosity, being impetuous in that at that time, in that situation, in that event or that occurrence, that was you could achieve something with it. It was called for. When if it doesn't produce the effect you want, being impetuous can actually not work. So again, these modes will their usefulness or lack of usefulness will not depend upon the time in that sense, but rather on the situation in question and the forces in question. This is what Machiavelli is kind of doing here. He's saying, no, you're not careful. And that's why it's awkward. He's saying it very awkwardly. And I think this is purpose, so that it's awkward. The awkwardness here is there to kind of confuse you and to lead you to maybe if you will just assume certain things, and that if you assume this is about depending on the times, I must depend upon the times. Careful. And then he continues here. As he says, we'll continue this. I'll read that the last sentence of the last paragraph again. This is paragraph 1, 2, 3. This is end of paragraph 5. From which arises, I have said, the two working diversely get the same effect, and two working similarly, one conducts him to his end and the other does not, period. Okay, this is how he ends that paragraph. Again, which repeated again, which arises, what I have said, that two working diversely get the same effect, two working different modes get the same effect, get the same thing, and the other two working similarly, one conducts to his end and the other does not. Okay. Next paragraph, the 6th. Upon this does the good vary. Okay. In other words, let me think that the good. What is good? What is beneficial? What is useful? The good will vary because what the means you. In other words, how do you get it? In order to get the good, you have the means you take and the situation and in other words, the contextual reality that you're in, the setting, the environment you're in. The environment, the setting, the conditions, the people, these things. The means, if it sits, the situation fits. If the means helps best to achieve the goal in that situation, then that is beneficial. If it doesn't, then it's not going to help you get it, so it'll be harmful to you, right? So therefore, the good, upon this the good varies. For if one governs himself with caution and patience, and the times and circumstances turned in such a mode that his government is good, he goes on happily, comma, semicolon. But if the times change and circumstances change, he falls, comma, because he does not change the mode or procedure. In other words, change his way of how he acts and how he directs. period, next sentence. Nor can one find a man so prudent that he would know how to accommodate himself to this, semicolon. That comes about because he is unable to deviate from that to which nature inclines him, semicolon, comma. And also because he, who has always prospered walking along one way, cannot be persuaded to depart from it. In other words, if you've done this and you always reward yourself, you get used to doing it, and you cannot see the logic of changing. So this is a lesson. You have to be. In other words, Machiavelli is saying that it's going to be hard. If you're used to doing something a certain way and you've prospered from it, you're going to think, oh, this is the way I should go. But then what happens if the circumstance changes? What happens if the situation is that you're confronted with a problem by which this normal procedure that you normally do won't deliver you the good you want? And if you're not able to change to achieve the good you want, change your procedure to get a good you want, then you're going to either, if you can avoid it, then you should avoid it. But if you can't avoid it, you will suffer. Fortune, if this is something you can't in other words, if this is cast upon you without any opportunity to do something, it will be bad. In other words, you don't know how, because he does not change his mode of procedure. Right? Next sentence. Nor can one find a man. I'll repeat to myself. Sorry. Nor can one man find a man so prudent that he would know how not to accommodate himself to this. In other words, nor can one find a man so prudent that he would know how to accommodate to this. That comes about because he is unable to deviate from which as nature has inclined him, comma, and also because he who has always prospered walking along one way cannot be easily able to depart from it. Okay, next sentence. And therefore the cautious man, comma, when it is time to be impetuous, does not know how to do it, whence he is ruined, semicolon. For, comma, if he had changed his nature with the times and circumstances, fortune would not change. Now here, this is footnote 3, and this is what, again, he says, see Discourses, book 3, chapter 9. See the discussion in the introduction about these passages. Now Alvarez talks about this in the introduction. This is one of those things. Fortune in its way is, let's do this. Let's go to the introduction. I have not done this. On the three modes of men, right? This is the three modes of men. Yes, evil Clifford. Well, let's do it. I'm going to go three modes of men. Why is that? Why not do it? We have time. Do we have time? Really? No. This is on page XVI, last paragraph. He goes talk about new modes and orders. We now make a brief digression to consider well-known phrase modes and orders. We suggest that we should understand the state as the extent to which the will of the prince is imposed on the matter which is given him. In other words, the matter is the things that are given him, right? The prince's will upon governing. He goes, the visible manifestations of that will are the orders. which he establishes. I believe it is to be significant that in chapter 6 he speaks of modes and orders, not of modes, orders and modes, of orders and modes, not of modes and orders, as he does in the preface or in book 1 of his discourses. The order or form is the construct of the mind of some excellent men, but he must have a proper matter for the occasion. Otherwise, he will be unable to actualize the form he wills. Otherwise, he will be unable to actualize the form he wills. Whether or not he will have the occasion is something which would seem to be given by fortune. Matter and fortune are linked together. In other words, matter and fortunes are thus linked together. We can say that nature and fortune are perhaps one and the same. One of the great questions, and it is perhaps the greatest question which Machiavelli raised in the Prince, is the extent to which fortune may be mastered. And this is what this chapter is dealing with. And what Machiavelli seems to say by modes is, for example, whether a prince is circumspect or impetuous, cruel or full, which is chapter 25, cruel or full of pity, chapter 17. These two things, these degrees, circumspect, or in other words, he is what? He's either circumspect or impetuous, cruel or full of pity. The matter which is the people, requires at times that a prince be extraordinarily cruel, at times that he shows pity, at times he be impetuous, and at others that he be circumspect or cautious. Period. And when Machiavelli concludes at times and the prince's modes do not coincide, he is unhappy. That is, fails to introduce his orders. If a prince were able to change his modes with the times, he would always be happy. Always master fortuna. This is again chapter 25. Machiavelli seems to say that it is humanly impossible to do so, to change one's modes. But is it simply impossible? In other words, is Machiavelli being honest here? Is he being honest? I mean, D'Alvarez asks, is Machiavelli being honest here? A prince's modes are, as we say, his adaptation to circumstance, to the world of appearances. If he could always adapt himself quickly to circumstance, his orders would never fail. Now, these are the three modes in that sense, the three modes that he deals with. Now, let's see if I'm missing that. No, that's the chapter he does there. And that's where he talks about that. The introduction is a very great piece in that sense. So I think that's good enough for our purposes. Let's go turn back to where we are. Now this leads us to the member. Remember Julius. Julius is always impetuous, right? He's always been successful. Pope. Now this is his. Okay, that's 9, a 7th chapter, 7th paragraph of this, page 148. Pope Julius II proceeds impetuously in every one of his affairs, semicolon. He found the times and circumstance very much of his comfort with his mode of procedure, which always resulted in him an happy end. Consider a new sentence. Consider the first enterprise he undertook, that of the Bologna, when Messer Giovanni Bentivino was still living. Period. Next sentence. The Venetians were not pleased with it, comma. Neither was the King of Spain, semicolon. Next comma. So please, semicolon. Neither was the King of Spain, semicolon. He was still negotiating with France over the enterprise, semicolon. And nevertheless, with his ferocity and impetuosity, he personally put the expedition into motion. So he was negotiating things, and everyone was not happy with his decision. He just went for it, right? That motion made Spain and the Venetians stand suspended and arrested. In other words, him acting impetuously, they were like, oh, like, they were negotiating and he just acted. That motion made the Venetians stand suspended. That motion made Spain and the Venetians stand suspended and arrested. The latter from fear, and the former from the desire to recover all in the kingdom of Naples. So the Venetians out of fear, and the Spain because he wanted to recover the kingdom of Naples from the French, right? And then what? Next semicolon. And the other side, he pulled in behind him the king of France, because the king, having seen him move and desiring to make him friendly in order to bring down the Venetians, judged that he was not able to deny the Pope his troops without manifesting offending him. So he makes the French join in. Okay, this is hilarious. In other words, if the times weren't chaotic, if the thing wasn't situation, if the Venetians did not fear and acted, if the Spanish saw that the threat of this enacted, and if the French king did not help, it would not have worked, but it did. In other words, he got luck. In a sense, Machiavelli saying his impetuosity paid off because the times permitted it. Because why did times permit it? Because the French thought they could get some advantage. The Spanish thought they could get advantage, and the Venetians thought they had too much to lose. Okay. Again, that's the thing. That's same thing. Sometimes somebody who would not be able to do something is able to do it. I mean, again, I would even argue that this is actually even true in present time. Actors are able to pull off things and succeed not because they really were able to do it, but because the other actors were conned into not acting. Actors who could have stopped it, actors who could have prevented it, were convinced either that it was not in their interest to not do it, to stay do nothing, to let them do it because you could get some other benefit from it, or to take advantage, or do so because you fear that it would harm you, or doing something would cause you problems. Okay, this is the classic case of this, and Julius offers with this. Now, next sentence, this is the penultimate sentence. This is 8, paragraph 8. At the end, the beginning sentence at the beginning of the paragraph is the last sentence on page 148. It says, Julius conducted then, with his impetuous motions, that which another pontiff, with all human prudence, would never have conducted, for, if he had waited to depart from Rome with the agreement firmly conducted, and all other things ordained, as any other pontiff would have done, he would never have succeeded, for the kingdom of France would have thousands of excuses, and others would have put into him 1,000 fears. Period. I wish to let stand his other actions, which are the same, and all of which succeed well for him. In other words, and the brevity of his life did not let him feel the contrary. Semicolon. For if times had come which would have made him need to proceed with care, his ruin would have followed. He would never have deviated from those modes to which nature inclined him. Now, there's this idea that nature inclines you to things. Nature is inclined. Well, you have to fight your nature. If nature inclines you something this way, and you know that it's going to be bad for you if you keep on doing it, you got to fight it. You got to overcome it. You have to overcome nature. Yeah. If you got, in other words, you say, but you can't do that. You can't overcome nature, as you cannot overcome fortune. Remember, we couldn't overcome fortune, but we do overcome fortune. First of all, it's very interesting. Fortune, who's fortune God of 50%, then we say 50-50, but then what happens? We realize fortune does not control us. Fortune only impacts us. And if we're smart, we prepare our means that fortune does not really impact us. Okay? But the problem is it's difficult for us to change our means because we're so used to doing things. Our nature is so unchanging. But is nature unchanging in the sense? Can we change our character? Can we change our mode of proceeding in such a way that we're able to do things? It's difficult, he's saying, yes. But we have to learn as we learn to have to know how to be bad, we're going to have to know how to be bad. Or if we're so used to doing things one way, we have to know how to change in that sense. He's warning us in a sense. Now this leads us to the famous last paragraph. I conclude, then, that fortune varying and men standing obstinate in their modes, in other words, fortune varies and men stands obstinate modes, and these are in concord with each other, men are happy, semicolon. And when they're in discord, comma, unhappy. First sentence. He concludes this, that given that fortune varies and men are obstinate in their modes, if they're in concord with nature, fortune, they'll be happy. If they will be in discord with fortune, they will be unhappy. Okay, so doesn't deny this is a true statement. I am very much of this judgment, that it is better to be impetuous than cautious. For fortune is a woman, and if one wishes to keep her down, it is necessary to beat her and knock her down. Whoa! Let's finish those sentences. And one sees that she lets herself be overcome more by these men than by those who proceed coldly, comma, semicolon, sorry. And therefore, comma, like a woman, comma, she is always a friend to the young, comma. Besides, they are less cautious, because they are less cautious, comma, are fiercer, comma, and with more audacity, they do command her. Okay. Now, D'Alvarez, the fortune, it talks about fortune here. Now, D'Alvarez has a note to fortune, points to the discourse. Whoa! So what is he saying? He recommends. He's in his own voice. He recommends it's better to be impetuous than cautious, because he said the metaphor is woman. It's like a woman. Well, wait a minute. Didn't he say the truth? And aren't you going to be in you say she likes it? No one's gonna like it. You're going to be in discord with fortune, right? If you're going to beat her down and bait her, you're going to be in how can I say this? This is going to be, you're going to have to be what? You're going to have to, the true statement is going to be, you're going to be unhappy. You're never going to be happy in this sense. You're going to always be, this is not a prudent course in that sense. In other words, only if fortune likes it does it come off well for you. If it agrees with fortune, if fortune doesn't like it, it won't come off well for you. Fortune will win. If fortune does not want you to do this, fortune does not appreciate it, or does not enjoy it, does not get pleasure from it, it's going to be it becomes, fortune will unleash her wrath upon you for it. If she enjoys it, wants it, it's accordance with fortune's wishes, then your impetuosity will be rewarded. But if it's not, and fortune opposes what you're doing at this thing, then you will not be rewarded. You will not win. You will lose. So Machiavelli's here is seeing whether you're paying attention to what he just said. And do you really understand what he's saying here? He's not saying, go do it, man, go do it. A lot of people read this, go do it, man, go do it. Yes, he's saying, and this is the interesting. What's being argued here is yes, you are to conquer something. You're to conquer your nature. You are to conquer nature. Remember, change the river to improve the fortune, control fortune. Control fortune and nature are very much connected. Therefore, if you can, as we can control nature, if we can control nature's, that it can change the banks of rivers to mitigate the impact of fortune. You can do the same thing with yourself. You can prepare your character to mitigate the effects of fortune. And one of the ways you mitigate the effects of fortune is being able to change your nature, to be able to change your modes, the way you're acting in procedures. That know that not this that this way that's given you success only gives you success because of the situation. It's not because your greatness is always. We always think our success is due to ourselves. No, it's the action of ourselves, and it's the interaction between our actions and the thing we're acting with. In other words, our judgment enables us to understand how our actions best to achieve in the setting, in the situation, what it is. So it's the interaction of all these things working. If they weren't done, if judgment was not right, you misjudged, you miscalculated, your judgment is not effective in this situation, you will not get the result you think you get. So therefore, to simply be impetuous, in other words, he's basically saying Julius got lucky. He's not praising, people think he's praising Julius. Julius is lucky. He's not praising those who get things by fortune. Remember, he always rewards it. In the previous chapter, he ends it. He always says it's better that it's through your virtue and through your actions. It's through your virtue and your actions and your arms, your actions. Things that you control, that you achieve these things. Fortune is relying on others to pick you up. The best fortune, and he said that all the way back in the discussion of the great princes. What are those great princes? Those princes of virtue. Men of virtue, men of arms. What only thing fortune gives them is the occasion to allow their virtue to be known. So yes, you depend upon, without fortune giving you the occasion, without the occasion to act. Now, sometimes the argument is, can you create fortune? Making fortune. Can you make fortune? And the fortune you want to make is the occasion. Can you create the occasion? And he's talked about this early in other chapters. So about making the occasions, creating situations that allow you to achieve things, to build your reputation. So therefore, he's not saying you can't do this. Well, on this, we have to come to an end. We're at the end of the paragraph. Of course, I hope the YouTube simple is not going to get. He advocated rape. He advocated rape. And this is again. I know stories of people I know almost lost their job at the Naval War College for reading this passage to a bunch of and a bunch of female naval officers were going, "He's talking about rape. Oh, I feel threatened." No, this is supposed to be a commander, a person who's going to be in charge doing this, and he had to think of, this was like in the early thousands it happened. This guy was I know this guy. He got a job teaching the War College. He was in a generation older, about 5 years older. He was Army. He was enlisted man in the Army, and then went to university. And went to grad school. Wrote on his dissertation in Alexander Hamilton upon statesmanship. I remember correctly. And in fact, he had to leave the War College. He went to another department of the Naval undergraduate school, something like that. He got one of those cushy government jobs, university jobs. So that he's will get much more retirement money than those other people like that. I know other teachers, but it's not glorious. But now he has to get, even in the Army. In the Navy, this was a big. Oh my God! Oh, we're so fragile. You can't quote Machiavelli. Okay, we'll see what I said. If you like this, you have any questions, please put the questions below. Like us. Share this with a friend. 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 we will be finishing this in our next video of the discussion of reading Machiavelli. It'll be the last video, next one. So the end of the series, we'll go be doing something else. Next, again, follow me on social media if you're interested. Please subscribe to see more other things. We'll talk about this that we might talk about. We might go, like I said, we might talk about. I'm gonna go between two different things. One I'm thinking about doing is Sun Tzu. It's easy. Sun Tzu will be a short one, and then Thucydides. So I might go do Thucydides. I want to do Thucydides. Okie dokie. Take care and have a nice day. Bye bye.